Hey guys, today I'm coming to you with a new feature that I have been working on for quite some time now, a few weeks, and it has to do with tenancy. So, as you know that in SaaSykit tenancy right now, all the database models and the database tables that we have are in shared database. So basically we have one database for all the tenants. This change or this package that I have been working on introduces the ability for you to have different tables or different databases for each tenant. So this has been accomplished by merging Filament Tenancy along with Laravel, Tenancy for Laravel package, which is the very famous package that offers so many features when it comes to tenancy, and also you can customize as much as you want. You can, even if you would like to divide the caches, divide the file systems for each tenant and so on, you can dive deeper as much as you can. But before we dive into the details, I would like to have some caution to you, or a word of caution. If your application doesn't have a need for having different databases for each tenant, please stay within the shared database model. So have everything in one database, because adding databases for each tenant will introduce much complexity to your application. So you will have to care about migrating the databases for each tenant. You have to, if you decide to divide caches and file systems, even when you start to debug problems, you will have to switch the context from that tenant to another tenant and so on. So it will make things much complicated on your side. So you have to be you have to know what you are doing very well. You have to study the Laravel, the Tenancy for Laravel package very well, and also how tenancy is implemented in Filament, so that you can know how to navigate any situation that you find yourself in. So my advice to you, if you don't have a valid, strong reason to switch to multi-databases for each tenant, so please stay with the vanilla SaaSykit tenancy, which comes everything comes within one database, and this will be sufficient for your project. But if you want to switch to a multi-database setup, please continue this tutorial. So let's dive into the details. And I have put together one graph here. On the left side, this is what we have currently. So if we zoom in a bit, as you can see, we have Filament, like the FilamentPHP or the SaaSykit tenancy, which basically SaaSykit tenancy uses Filament for tenancy, builds on top of that. What we have now is one shared database. And in this shared database, we have all the models that come within SaaSykit tenancy. And we link them to the tenant by the foreign key. So basically each table would have a tenant underscore ID, and then this is being linked to the tenant table. This is the relationship. And what happens when Filament tries to load some information for that tenant, it scopes the query by the tenant ID, so that information related to this tenant will only be displayed and other tenant information will not be displayed. So that's quite simple. What comes within this package that I have been working on, that I'm introducing in this tutorial, we will have this setup, the new setup. The new setup will basically mimics the setup of Tenancy for Laravel. Tenancy for Laravel has these two ways to store data. We have a central database where we have some central information regarding to the central app, so to say. And what will happen here is that we will keep these models that we have that come within SaaSykit tenancy, we keep it as is here, because these models are more about the management of the system, like plans, like orders, like subscriptions, and so on. So we will keep them as is, and we will keep them also linked to the tenant by ID as is. But in addition to that, there is another way where we can store data, which is basically the tenant database. So each tenant that will be created will have its own database, and you can choose to introduce models there or tables and store the data of the tenant there. So let's say we are building like a to-do application for simplicity. You would have like the to-dos of that tenant stored in the tenant database. So you have a to-do table, and this table will be here. But the rest of the database tables that are like more needed for the application to operate and more like should be central will be stored in the central database. So that basically would give you a bit of idea about how things are working or will be working if you switch to the new model where you have different databases for each, like database for each tenant. With that said, let's install the plugin and see it in action and see how to configure it basically. So as usual, I have prepared documentation that you can go through that will help you install and configure the new package. And there is the word of caution that I have been talking about. Don't switch to multi-database tenancy if you don't need that one. With that in mind, let's go further. So I introduced the new plugin here as a package or as a new repository that will be available at code.SaaSykit.com. You should have access to that. If you purchase SaaSykit, you have already like a username and password. You can log in and you can use this package or install it from here. So as usual, this is a private package, so it's not a public one. So you cannot just include it from like Composer, or require it via Composer. You need just to add some definitions for Composer to know where to load this package from. What I did here is that I installed a new SaaSykit tenancy, just a vanilla SaaSykit tenancy for the demo so that we can install the package on and see how it works. Okay, let's close this one. No, we need this one. So let's first go to the Composer and add the repositories. Okay, and I will change the minimum stability to make it to be dev. You will not need to do that because I still didn't publish stable release or a release of that. I'm still working from the master branch, so that's why I have to switch that to dev. But you will not, by the time that you will see this tutorial, you will not need to do that basically. You will just go here and then do a Composer require, and then the package name, copy, paste, tuck. As you can see, part of the dependencies that we have is Stancl tenancy, which is the tenancy for Laravel package. Now let's go back. Okay, we did this one, we did this one, and now let's start the installer of the plugin. So this installer will do quite a few things for you, so to make your life easy, because there are quite a few changes that need to be done here. First, it will add a migration file. So we have a look at the database at migrations. We should have here a new data field that is being added to the tenants table, which is being used by the tenancy for Laravel package. This is necessary for that. So we added that. We added a new tenancy service provider. If we go here, provider, a new tenancy service provider, which we will talk about later. And it also created the database migration /tenant folder. This is basically where you should define any tenant-specific models in your database. So we go here, we go to migrations, we go to tenant. It's an empty folder now, but you can add any table definitions that is related to the tenant, the tenant database basically, and this will be only migrated to all tenant databases that you have. We will also have an example now. Okay, we did that. What we have here a question. Do you want to modify eligible models to use the central database trait? This is very important. So you need to write yes, or just this is the default option. What will happen here is that the script will do some modifications to your models here. We will see that now. So yes, and then do you want to run the migrations? Yes, I want to run the migrations, and that the migration is done. So as you can see, models here, all the model tables, or all the tables basically have been changed to include this use central database connection or central connection trait, which enforces that these models should be loaded from the central database. If you remember, if you recall here, we have this central database, and then we have the tenant database. All the models that we have should be loaded from the central database. And yes, that should be it. And then we have the migration is done. We are fine. Let's continue with the next step. So we run that one. Now we go to Bootstrap and then providers and add this tenancy service provider that we just introduced. So Bootstrap Bootstrap providers, and then we go down, we paste this line. Then in the dashboard panel provider, so basically the panel where we have the tenancy within our project, this is the definition of the panel and the configuration and so on. What we need to do is introduce, or like basically add the plugin there so that it could be used. So we go down here, we paste this one, and these need to be imported. This also needs to be imported. There are multiple versions, if you notice here. What we are interested in is the one that is in app providers, the one that we just that has been added to the project by the installer, not the Stancl one, but this one. So make sure to do that. And we go to Bootstrap app and copy this, or let's copy this, and here Bootstrap and then app, include these ones. Also, this is referencing the tenancy service provider that we included. And then we need to adjust the tenant model now. The tenancy for Laravel package needs some modifications or some traits to be added and some functions to be added to the tenant model. So what we need to do is just to copy all of these here until this one, and go to the models tenant and replace these two lines with what we got. We can also copy this one and paste it here to be on the clean side of things. And yeah, that's it. So that's basically the idea here. Is one note that I would like to mention is that the tenancy for Laravel package uses some kind of a virtual column. This is where we have the data column, if you remember, in the migrations, and it stores a JSON of all fields that are not represented by columns within the database. This is kind of like to be flexible, to store anything that has to do with the tenant in this data. So tenants dot whatever, like any data point that they want to store, and that's why they add this data. So what you need to do is that for all the existing columns that we have, if we have here, let's connect to the database so that we can see. Actually, it's not a Postgres, it's a MySQL, yes. And user is root, test connection should work fine. Okay, we have the database. We go there and we search for demo. Yes, this one. This is our database. If you go there and we go to see the tenants, as you can see, we have columns here, and these are some columns then if you would like these columns or the data to be still stored in these columns, and not to land in the data, you need to add these lists of columns here to this get custom columns function. So what I'm trying to say is that if you have any columns in the table, in the tenant table, and if you added any further columns in the future, you just need to list these columns here in the get custom columns, exactly like what you do in the fillable. So ideally, you would copy these all the columns here or this array to this function as well. Yeah, with that said, we are done. So what we need to do now is just go to the landing page. I added a few products. I didn't even set up the payment provider because we will not need that. But if we go down here, we have 3 products. Let's say we want to buy one of them. So click on this product and click confirm and pay. We will have an error here because we don't have Stripe configured, but it doesn't matter because at this point, we should have our dashboard, or we should have our tenant created. So if we go to the database here and the tenants table, we should find one record already created. And if we go to the dashboard here, we should see all the database. Now, in this moment, the tenant has been resolved already, and this data has been loaded from the central database. All good and clear. Now let's say if we stick with the to-do application that we would like to implement. So let's say you would like to add a new to-do model for your tenant and store this in your tenant database, not in the central database. How to do that? So we go first. We need a new migration. So a new model with the migration. So let's search for to do. I think I have that. I did that before. So I make model. A is I just add an alias for PHP artisans just to make things like easier for myself. So A is PHP artisan. PHP artisan make model to do and add a migration also, please. Now the migration has been created. If we go to the migration, let's add a few fields. So let's say, yeah, good boy AI, and we can say maybe we can add like just a description, whatever, right? Description nullable. Okay, that should be it. And now we can PHP artisan migrate to no. Actually, before we migrate, yeah, we shouldn't migrate. We should go first to the database migrations folder. We would like to add that to the tenant. And what we have outside here, just under migrations folder, these are the central models. So what we basically want to do is to just move this one, the create to do table that we just added now, the migration, and add it under the tenant and confirm, and that's it. So we would like now to have this to-dos table for that tenant. Now what we want to do is migrate A and then tenants migrate, which is a command that comes with tenancy for Laravel that allows you to migrate database for tenants. So enter. Sorry, I did a mistake. It should be tenants migrate, yes, and that should be migrated. Now the question is, can we see that? Which is a good question. By default, the tenant's database will be called tenant underscore and then the UID of the tenant. So if we go to the table here of tenants, and then we have the UID of the tenant that has been created, it's like 563 CC. We go here in the databases, 563 CC. I think we need to reload. Yes, now I think we should have it. 563 CC. Yes, it is this one. So this is the database of the tenant. Now we can see it. Now we can open it. And when we open it, we will find the to-dos there. Yeah, it's an empty table. Okay, now we would like to add that resource to the dashboard, to the Filament dashboard, so that our user can add to-dos to their to-do list or something. So we search for resource, because I did that also before, to do. Now we are making a Filament resource and call it to do, and then auto-generate it basically. So, and we would like to add that to the dashboard, not to the admin panel, and that should be it. And then if we switch now to our tenant dashboard and refresh, we will have a to-dos here. But if we click on to-dos, we will get an error. Why? This is because Tenancy is not aware that we have different databases now. Like, the part that is aware of that is the Tenancy for Laravel package. And the Tenancy for Laravel package can deal with that already, so because we configure that. So it can load the data from the to-dos table, but Filament still is using the older way of dealing with tenancy data. Basically, what happens behind the scenes is that Filament automatically scopes the query to the tenant. So basically adds where tenant underscore ID equals whatever to each query, to make sure that only the data that is related to that tenant is being shown here. And when it tries to do that here, it sees that there is no relationship to the to that table, because that table is actually here. It's in a different database, doesn't know anything about the tenants, which is in the central database. How to solve that is actually pretty easy. So if we go to the to-do resource that we just created in the dashboard, the Filament dashboard, all what we need to do here is to say is scope to tenant equals false. What this does is it instructs Filament to avoid this kind of scoping that happens behind the scene. So we are saying to Filament, hey, this is not related to tenant as you know it, but it is related to tenant that we defined, that the new tenant way of operations, which is basically loading that data from the table which is in another database. So that's it. We go back, we refresh, and that's it. Boom, it's working. Let's make sure that it's working fine. Now we go to the okay, we don't see the yes, the schema is not populated. We can populate the schema with some description. Let's say we want the title, only the title. And I think what we need to do still also to go to the models. Where's the models? And then to do, and add that fillable thingy to here, because to be able to like insert the title, go to title. Title is 1, 2, 3, create. And then if we go back to to-dos, we have an empty table, an empty line also, because we don't have the columns here. We have to define the column. Yes, okay, refresh. We have the title, and the title is 1, 2, 3. And if we go back to the database to make sure that we have that record for that tenant database, we go to the to-do and we will find it here. That's basically it. One other thing that I would like to mention is that you have also the option to use domains for each tenant. So what we did until now is that we used the same standard way of resolving the tenant in Filament by having the UID of the tenant in there in the URL. So if we go back here and go to the providers and the tenancy service provider that has been added by the plugin for us, all of this here is what comes with tenancy for Laravel package, like these events and stuff, and all of that is like just tenancy for Laravel boilerplate, except this field where we have this tenancy initializer, where we define how we initialize the tenant, and we have here by default this set to initialize tenancy by UUID, which means that we resolve the tenant from the URL using the UID. This is the standard way. We have, if we go there, if we click here and we open the folder structure, we have here another one which is called initialize tenancy by domain. This means that we can, if you would like to have different domains for each tenant, you can use that. We can have a look at that now. So if we copy this one and we go here and we make sure that we use the SaaSykit Filament Tenancy for Laravel, initialize tenancy by domain. And something else that we need to do to configure domains is, we already did that. Yes, we already did that. And we need to change a bit the definition in the dashboard panel provider. So we go here. Provider film. Let's basically replace this with that. And that should be it. What we are trying to say here to Filament is that, hey, we have this domain field in the tenant model. Please use it as the identification for that tenant. And we also, because we set the tenant identification here in the package also to be loaded by domain here, this means that tenancy for Laravel will also use the domain. So we are trying to align two things together. Filament, hey Filament, use the domain, and hey tenancy for Laravel, please also use the domain to resolve the tenant. And what you will need to do is to make sure that this domain field is not empty. So basically, depending on your application, you might want to ask your users, maybe on the onboarding. We have, by the way, an onboarding plugin that you can use, and there is a video already for that, and you can find it also in the documentation. But you can, while you are onboarding your customer, to ask them, okay, what domain you would like to have, and save that in their tenant, like in the tenant model, basically. But for the sake of this demo, we can use the same domain here. Let's say we want to use a subdomain of our domain. So let's say T1 dot whatever. Of course, we don't need that, and we don't need that. And then we store it. Let's make sure that is correct. It should be correct. And yeah, let's copy that one, go to a new page. Let's see, T1 dot blah blah blah. Then we don't need the UID anymore, and we go to the to-dos. What we will see now is you need to log in. And that's for a reason, because by default, the login session that you have is linked to the domain that you did the login from. And because the domain now changed, it's now t1.demo blah blah blah. It's now the session has been expired, or you are not logged in anymore. You need to log in again. So because this domain is being stored to your session, you might need to change that. There is a way to change that, and I will also add that in the documentation. That you can just change some configuration to make like some kind of like a wild card domain. So basically, whenever the user logs in from anything.demo blah blah blah, they will stay there, and this will allow the users also to switch between tenants, because as you know that in the tenancy panel, in the Filament panel, we can have a tenant selector, and you can choose between the different tenants that you have. But for the sake of this demo, we can just log in again. I have the same user, and then we go, and then here we go. We are here on our domain, and let's make it a bit light. Yes, and we have everything, and we are there. We don't have a UID anymore. And yeah, that's basically it. That's what I have been cooking for quite some time now. I hope that you like that. I hope that you use that in your projects, and it will make your life easier. And again, if you don't need that, please don't use it. Don't go this route, because this will make your life hard. It doesn't mean that it's a bad way, but some projects need that. Only if you need that, do it. If not, then please don't. And see you in the next video for another feature. Bye.